Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. My name is Emily Nichols-Mitchell, and I will be your speaker for today. I also want to thank Beam, Melissa, for all of her help, and I want to thank everyone who has volunteered to help with this endeavor. Judith Miller, thank you very much for putting this together, as well as Buzz and Conference Services. I also want to talk about why we're here today and start to set some expectations on what you might want to get out of this presentation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first, and then we're going to go right into the presentation. Is that fair? For the questions.
The operator.
I got to get used to this. Yes?
Are you ready to begin?
Yes, I'm ready to begin.
Okay, one moment.
Okay, we have to wait. Everybody stand up. We're going to exercise.
This is the operator. Thank you for standing by. All participants are on a listen-only mode, and I'd like to turn the call over to Emily Nichols-Mitchell. You may begin.
Hi, welcome. I'm going to start this over. Hi, welcome. My name is Emily Nichols-Mitchell, and I'm so glad that you decided to join me either on the phone or live through Buzz, and especially for those who decided to come and support me here in the room. I'm hoping that this is going to be a very fun time. I want to start out by thanking everyone in the Beam organization for their support and for their help and for being a sponsor of this event. When I talked to Greg Paris about this event, he was the first to jump on board because he wanted to do anything that he could to help make sure that individuals in this room have the tools that they need as they look at taking their career to the next level, no matter whether it's here or in a different company. So if you happen to see Greg Paris somewhere, please give Greg Paris a handshake and tell him thank you, because if it wasn't for Greg, we probably wouldn't be having this presentation today. I also want to thank Judith Miller, and I want to thank Melissa Reeves for their support and their help in helping with the logistics and planning of this program. So we're going to get right into it. For the individuals on the phone, we'll take questions at the very end. And for the individuals here in the room, I will take questions throughout the event. And as I get to the end, if I start to run over, then I may stop the questions so I can try to get through the slide deck. Is that fair? My name is Emily Nichols-Mitchell. As I mentioned before, I've been here at McGraw-Hill for almost 2 years. And I've been in HR, talent acquisition, generalist for about 15, 20 years. So with that, I have probably reviewed hundreds, thousands of resumes and cover letters, even when there was no such thing as the applicant tracking system. So we'll talk about how that has changed the landscape of recruitment. So within my career, as I've said, I've looked at resumes, I've looked at cover letters, but I've also looked at how the landscape has changed. And so I'm hoping that you will be able to ask questions. So I'm going to put a little bit onus of the expectation of this presentation on you. So I'm going to take 50% of the ownership. I'm going to try to make sure that whatever questions you have, I can answer them. And I'm going to ask you to take 50% of the accountability so that you make sure that you get what you're looking for out of this presentation by asking questions. Is that fair? All right. So we're going to get started. So we're going to talk about why you're here today. So what are your expectations? Are there one or two people in the room who'd like to talk about or give me an idea of what their expectations are, what they're trying to get out of this presentation? Anybody? Okay. So we're going to talk about, hopefully in some of the other presentations I've done, some people have asked me, I just really want to know how to be more comfortable in finding a new job. I really want to know what a recruiter looks for when they get my resume, why my resume doesn't seem to go to the next level. How can I get from submitting my resume in the applicant tracking system to actually landing the job? And what are the steps in between? So we're going to talk about knowing yourself. We're going to talk about a cover letter, resume, job search, and interview. So I'm really giving you my perspective and the perspective of several recruiters that I actually meet with on a quarterly basis, and we talk about what works, what doesn't work, and how things have changed over the years. So we're going to start with knowing yourself. Knowing yourself is really the most important step in your job search. And most people will say, I know myself. I've been in my body all my life, right? Most people will say, you know what, let's pass all that. I already know. Let's get straight to the job search. Let's get straight to what my resume should look like. But if you don't know yourself and what you're looking for, how are you able to articulate it on your resume? How you're able to then articulate it if you meet someone in the elevator and this is your dream job and he's the hiring manager. How do you start with that conversation? That makes sense? So when I ask someone if they know themselves, and if I ask you what you mean, some people will respond to me, such as when I was talking to Chris and Melissa about it, they responded with strengths and weaknesses. And that is absolutely correct. However, it's much bigger than that. It really goes into talking about your work-related and your non-work-related accomplishments. It goes into talking about what is it that you're really looking for in your next career. It thinks broader. It goes into the depth of making sure that you know what your skill set is, what your accomplishments are. If I ask someone right now to stand up in this room, if I said, Pam, stand up in the room and name 3 accomplishments that you can tell me on the summer intern program, she'd jump up and name 10, because I know Pam. But however, she might actually pause, because what do most of us do? If you've been in your job longer than a year, how many people have been in their current position longer than 1 year? Raise your hand. How many people have been at McGraw-Hill longer than 5 years? Raise your hand. 10 years, keep your hand up. 15, 20, okay. So if you've been at this company and in your current position longer than a year, you have a tendency not to focus on your accomplishments, right? So if I walked up to you and said, Melissa, tell me your accomplishments, Melissa would be like, what? But if I walked up to Melissa and said, Melissa, tell me all the projects you have due, and all the deadlines, and all the things that are going wrong, and everything, does this sound familiar? You could tell me that. You can give me a laundry list of all your deliverables, everything that you need to get done. I mean, anybody I walk up to these days and I say, how are you? The first response, I'm swamped. Right? Am I on target? So they don't focus on their accomplishments. So if you've been in your job longer than a year, you're not thinking about your accomplishments. And I'm going to ask everyone on the phone and live to take 30 seconds and write down 3 accomplishments. Right now. Off the top of your head, write down 3 accomplishments. It doesn't matter what they are. And I can tell all those on the phone and live, everyone in the room had this look on my face like, let's move it on, Emily, to the resume writing section. And then I said, write down 3 accomplishments. They went, oh my goodness. Now I've got to write down these 3 accomplishments. So it just gives you an idea that knowing yourself is not that easy, right? So if someone happened to walk into this room and you knew that they had the dream job, how can you articulate your accomplishments to that person? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the industry and size and scope and what satisfies you and what dissatisfies you. When you start thinking about yourself, everyone close your eyes and just think about your current job and all the things that satisfies you in that position. Did you have a hard time going to sleep last night because you just couldn't wait to get to work this morning? Because you were so happy, because you were thinking about all the things that satisfied you. So write down a couple things right now that satisfy you in your job, or satisfy you in your company, satisfies you with your boss. Just 2 things. Now, write down the things that dissatisfy you. Be honest, I won't ask to read them. Think about the things that least satisfy you, not just in your job, but in the culture, in the company. And think about the things that satisfy you in your job, in the culture. What's important to you? Is it career advancement? Is it salary? Is it work-life balance? For those who might live in Philadelphia, is it being closer to home? For those of you who live here, is it having more to do? What is it that satisfies you? What is it that is that one little thing or 5 things that satisfies you? So what I tell people is, get a chart and have about 5 columns. And in one column, put all the things that satisfies you. In one column, put all the things that dissatisfy you. Be honest. This will take a couple of times to do this to get exactly what you're looking for. Put your goals down. Truly, what are your goals? One of the things that people say to me, I just need you to help me find a job. And then I respond by saying, what are your goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then there's a pause. I just need a job. Okay, but after that, what are you expecting that job to do for you? In reading some of the books and researching, someone had a quote, and I really like this. They said, you're going to end up finding a job anyway. You might as well find a job you like. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? You're going to find a job, whether it's in the company, whether it's somewhere else. You're going to find a job. You're going to have that job search. I met a hiring manager in my previous role. He'd been at the company for about 18 years. And every year he told me that he pulled out his resume and he started writing down accomplishments. And he did it around performance review. He said, because it was fresh. And I said, wow, why are you doing it now? And he said, I do it every year. It helps me to know how to stay on top of the current trends in my job. It helps me to stay on track of what I need to start learning. So he was looking at that in a different perspective. He said every year he puts his resume out. I said, oh, and I'm the recruiter. I'm like, you're not going anywhere, right? He goes, no, that's not the purpose. The purpose is so I can continue to help my current company. He said, as long as I know what my competitors are doing, they're called conversations. I now know how to have the conversation in my current role to stay on top of my current job. That makes sense? So when you start to think about it, write all those things down. Write down where you'd like to live, locations. Write down targeted companies and the type of positions that your skills could transfer into. What is your niche? What makes you special? What makes you the ideal person? And all of these things that we're talking about, start to create your 2-minute elevator speech. And your 2-minute elevator speech is what you talk about in your interview. It's what you talk about when you meet someone who you want to network with. It's called your brand. And it's how you want to position yourself to the marketplace so people will see you as a fit into their company. So right now it's focusing on you and what you want so you can be able to articulate how you want to target and talk about what you want to those particular companies. That make sense? It helps you to start to create your story, which I call the elevator pitch. Any questions? Thoughts? Make sense? Nod your head so I know you guys didn't go to sleep. Okay. Cover letter. I've had a lot of people who've asked me, now that the applicant tracking system is around and we hear how many resumes recruiters get, is the cover letter still important? Do the recruiters read the cover letter? And I see people shaking their head like, yes, because we spend a lot of time working on that cover letter for who to read it. Well, I will tell you, I did a survey about 6 months ago to recruiters all around the world, and I think I had about 100 responses back to my inbox, asking the recruiter 2 questions. What are the top 5 things that keep your resume from moving forward, and do people read their cover letter? And I had about half and half respond that they read cover letters and some don't. And one of the threads throughout the entire conversation was everybody wants to see the cover letter because you don't know when the hiring manager is going to ask for it. So do your best on the cover letter. The cover letter should be no more than 1 page. Now, I'm going to twist this a little bit. Most cover letters that I receive focuses on how well that person does. It focuses on that person's accomplishments. And I think that's great, as long as your accomplishments are relating to the job you're applying to. When I look at the cover letter, that is the first impression that I'm going to have of you. And I should start to visualize you in the job you're applying for. So I tell people, if what you put on that cover letter is not related to the job, even though you might do it here, it's not going to be useful in the cover letter. You want your cover letter to tell a story. You want your cover letter to draw me in so that I will continue reading on. You don't want the cover letter to tell the whole story, just enough to draw me in. You want it to highlight, again, accomplishments and skills that relate to the job. You should be able to tell that from the job description, based on what's important in the job description. Usually the first 3 or 4 bullets in the job description set the stage of what's important in the job description. That first paragraph, when they talk about this dynamic person they're looking for at McGraw-Hill Companies, they're looking for this coordinator, this director, this recruiter, this finance person, that first paragraph sets the stage of how your cover letter should look. And what I'm not saying is don't copy and paste that. I can tell. I'll be able to tell you copied and pasted it. But you want to use that as your guide to start talking about, now how does that relate to what I've done, and how does that relate to my accomplishments? You want to include the name of the position. Why is it important? If the recruiter's going through a bunch of resumes and they have a bunch of positions, some may be similar. It could be Finance Analyst 1, Finance Analyst 2. You want to be clear, and you want me to always be clear on what you're applying for. Because I may not be able to tell, especially if you're transferring from one career to another career, I may not be able to tell by just looking at your resume at a glance. You want it to be authentic. And the key thing is you want it to be tailored. I have Angela in the room. She can nod her head. How many times do we get cover letters and resumes that we can tell we must be a mass male? We can tell that it's not tailored to that job. If I'm looking for a recruiter, I may have a different skill set of that recruiter I'm looking for than JP Morgan Chase or another company. So you want to look at the clues in the job description to help you with the cover letter. Now the resume. I've seen resumes 10 pages. So I'm going to tell you, try to keep it to 2. I know you have a lot to say, but maybe we'll get a chance to have a face-to-face conversation to tell me more. So when you look at this, it says, say all you have to say in the fewest possible words your reader will skip over them. So how many times have you gotten just an email from someone, and the email was really long? Did you read all the email? You just kind of skipped over some and got straight to the point. Same thing. Same thing happens when I'm looking at the resume, except you're wanting to convince me to read longer and read more. So make sure you're catching my eye right off the bat. So back to me asking my recruiter friends the top 5 things that keep your resume from moving forward to the hiring manager. Would somebody like to tell me what they think the number 1 thing is? Typos? Number 1. Number 2? Grammar errors. With Microsoft and Word spell check in 2012, I still get a lot of resumes. And my recruiter colleagues will tell me they still get a lot of resumes with a lot of grammar errors. Now, I was in a session not too long ago, and someone questioned me. I'm not applying to be a particular position where I need to know how to spell. That's why I have spell check. So if I have all the qualifications you're looking for, and I'm this great candidate, why would you not move me forward? Well, hiring managers look at your grammar errors and your misspelled words. And by the way, grammar errors in many cases is you use the wrong word in the sentence. The word was spelled correctly, you just totally used the wrong word. So sometimes misspelled words are not always caught, or grammar errors are not always caught when you do spell check, because it may be the wrong word in that sentence, or the wrong tense. So be very careful of that. But in any case, as I was speaking to them, and I was talking about why a hiring manager may look at that so closely when it's not necessarily related to their job, it's because the hiring manager, the first thing hiring managers will say to me is, that person may not have attention to detail. And anyone in this room have a job that they don't need to have attention to detail? Right. So it may not be that they saw that misspelled word, but they said, wow, I need someone who's going to have attention to detail. So now the hiring manager's thinking about all the reports, all the spreadsheets, and all the information that could go out incorrectly. And then the second thing the hiring manager will say to me is, if they really wanted this job, this is the time not to have those mistakes. So they probably aren't very serious about this position. Then they talk about clearly showing added value in your resume. Again, make sure your resume is tailored to the job. So your resume should not be a list of duties, responsibilities, or tasks. Your resume should now be about accomplishments. And think of every bullet that you have on your resume. How have you reduced something? How have you increased something? How have you improved something? How have you made something more efficient? What was the result of that? So I'll pick on Pam Coles, our intern person. Pam Coles is leading the intern program. Well, the result of her leading the intern program is she's now introducing the company to the new generation. Every summer, hiring managers will say they've learned as much from the interns as the interns learn from them. She's branding the company to the new generation. She now has the face of the generation. People are talking about this company through those interns. They go home and they talk to their families. They're spreading the news about McGraw-Hill. So make sure that you're aligning your resume and how it adds value. So if she was looking for a position, she'd talk about how she adds value. She wouldn't just say, I brought in 265 interns this year, and they had 10 presentations, and they attended a luncheon. You see, those are tasks. See what I'm saying? She would talk about how her task created something better for McGraw-Hill. So take a second right now and think about one accomplishment, one task, one duty that you have, and how have you improved the company, improved something, or reduced, or made something more efficient. If you happen to have data that you can add, you saved $1 million, you saved $100,000. Add that in, because now people can see and visualize you saving them money. People can visualize Angela reducing the time to fill. People can visualize Christine Jones for helping with change management so that the company now is able to make change gracefully. So she doesn't put in her resume that she created change decks. She would put in her resume how she helped the result of those change decks. Make sense? So I'm sure everyone can now start to visualize all the things that they've done and how they have now created a better place for McGraw-Hill and how the results could matter. Because at the end of the day, you want your resume to be seen by the recruiter from the standpoint of them seeing you in that particular role, helping them improve on whatever they're trying to prove on, meeting their needs. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips that will help you stay organized with your resume. Number one, you're now in the job search, whether it's internal or external. Your email address should be your first name and last name at Yahoo, Gmail, whatever. Can you guys still hear me? Did I turn off? Did I turn off? It is, isn't it? Okay, I'm back on. Okay. So your email address should be your first name and last name at whatever. The purpose of that is if you happen to get into a conversation with the hiring manager, think about all the emails you get in one day and how when you get ready to sort to look for someone, you look for someone by their first name or last name, right? What happens is when you have your personal emails, I had one that said GoBucks123 at yahoo.com. I have no idea who that person is. Remember, everything you're doing is creating a brand. You want your name to be in front of the recruiter, and you want their name to be in front of the hiring manager. So when you create that email, the first thing they're going to see when they're sorting and looking for you, you want to make it easy for the recruiter to look for you. So when you start to actually get past the first dialogue, and now you're actually having some conversation with the recruiter, either email or communication, you want your name to be easily sourced through the email system. So first and last name. If you have a common name, put your middle initial in there. And if you have to use numbers, put the numbers on the end so it does not distract from the sorting. Second is put a number where I can reach you, or the recruiter can reach you, or someone can reach you during the day. Your goal is that we can actually reach you during the day. Many people will put their home number on there. Well, I'm gone home at the same time you're gone home. So the goal is that I can reach you during the day. Now that you have your email set up and you have your phone number on the resume, change your voicemail. It's now a business. So you want people, again, every touch point is a branding for you. So you want now people, when they call you, say your first and last name so that it's still a reminder that I called the right person. So if you I called someone not too long ago and their dog barked because they wanted me to know that Lucy the dog and them was not at home, so they had the dog barking through the voicemail. So I'm not sure if that's the impression you want to leave when the recruiter calls. So keep it very simple. Be very professional with your voicemail. So that's the second thing. The third thing is when you're starting to apply, we're going to talk about some of the websites. Craigslist is a great place we'll talk about a little later. It has been mentioned that now people are leaving off their street address or their street address number for security reasons. Because remember, when you're uploading your resume to particular applicant tracking systems, if it's not going to a direct company, you want to be careful of how you're putting your information, your personal information on your resume. So a lot of people now are putting their city, their state, their zip code, their email address, and their cell phone number. And the reason why I was saying, put your name on your voicemail is for privacy reasons. I had a conversation not too long ago with outplacement firms, and there are many people who get up every day and they go to the outplacement firm because they have not told their spouse they're looking for a job. They have not told their spouse they're out of a job. So we as recruiters, sometimes we won't leave our name, we won't leave the information if it's not clear to us who we're leaving it to on a voicemail for privacy reasons. Any questions? So keywords, yes.
I was told one time by a recruiter not to put your resume up on career building sites like Monsters and so on, because someone can actually represent you without you knowing.
Well, they could represent you if you have something on LinkedIn. So I wouldn't necessarily be as concerned about if you upload your resume on Monster or Career Builder, any of the main sites, because they cost money to even have access to those sites. So your goal is to make sure that you have your resume in enough places that your brand is carrying so people can find you. Good question, thank you. Keywords. So one of the things that came up in a couple other sessions I've done is job titles. If your job title is specific to your current company, if your job title is specific to McGraw-Hill, and it's not a job title that would be known outside this company, then you want to make sure that you change your job title. Either keep your current job title and put in parentheses what that job title would stand for outside the company, because you want to make sure that when someone opens your resume, they know exactly what your resume stands for. I had someone who, in another particular division, they were an accounting manager. So when I asked them what they did, they were actually in the billing department. But based on their title, I could never tell that. So you want to make sure that your resume is telling the story so that in 10 seconds or 15 seconds or less, I get the story. So if you need, it's not to say you're going to make up a title, but if it's an industry-specific title that will be known outside, you want to make sure that the person you're targeting your resume for understands the position that you actually did. That makes sense? Keywords. Another thing about keywords is the formatting of your resume. Once you have your heading, which has your name, your phone number, and all that information, and you have your summary, underneath that you will find many people will have areas of expertise, and they'll list words, right? Have you seen that on resumes, and your resume might look like that? That's a key. The reason why those are there, yes, it does list your areas of expertise, but it also are keywords that the recruiter is likely searching for. So it's positive that you have that. Am I on the right track, Angela? So it's positive that you have that because those end up being keywords that are searchable in our system. When you're uploading your resume in an applicant tracking system, there are many different applicant tracking systems, and some are more sophisticated than others. So I would suggest that there's some fine print right below the word browse when you're uploading your resume, and it will tell you the type of format that that applicant tracking system accepts. That's very important because there are some applicant tracking systems that only accept text versions, scannable versions of your resume. That means no bullets, no lines, no squiggly words, no pretty stuff. And if you upload it differently than what the applicant tracking system says it accepts, your resume will end up being all symbols. Or I may not be able to open the resume at all. So be aware of what it says. If it says PDF and it has in parentheses readable, that means it's okay to upload a PDF document. There are some applicant tracking systems that if you upload a PDF document, it cannot scan that document. And you want to make sure that when you upload your resume, that when someone 3 months, 4 months down the road is looking for a particular person with your skill set, that your resume is scannable so those keywords are caught and your resume pops up to the top. That helpful? A lot of people want to have really cute resumes. They have columns and they have different colors. That is really not that important to us, and it can create problems as you're uploading it in the applicant tracking system. Just recently, I was looking for a senior director of master black belt, and someone had, I think, I'm making an assumption, they had put all these really pretty squiggly lines, or they might have used some really pretty fonts. At any rate, I could not read their resume. The whole resume was symbols. I couldn't call them to even tell them to resubmit the resume because that was symbols. So stick to the basic fonts. Don't use industry jargon. If you know this is jargon that only this industry uses, make it generic. If you're in sales and you've sold textbooks and you're now trying to go into selling pharmaceuticals, just talk about you've sold products. Make it generic, because if you make your resume so industry specific, the recruiter might only think you can sell that particular product, or that recruiter may only think you can do that particular product. When you use acronyms, every company has the same letters that mean something different. So spell it out. If it's that important that you need to add it, spell it out. Don't make an assumption that the recruiter is going to know what that means, even if it's in the same industry. That makes sense? Any questions?
What about people who include a photo on their resume?
I would not suggest including a photo. I'm glad you brought that question up. The United States has certain laws of what recruiters look for. And so things like date of birth, how many children you have, how much you weigh, your photos, those are items that I would not suggest you having. Yes?
We have a question from one of our viewers and Buzz. What if your current title on your resume is not the type of job you're looking for? How would you let the recruiter know that you're actually looking to change careers?
Good question. Your title and what you've done is pretty much what you've done. But what you can do is when you start your resume, and there's another session that we actually do that goes into more of a deeper dive with this, but what you can do is as you start to title your resume, you'll find in some formats that I like, and some of the resume writers I've talked to like this as well. Again, it's a marketing piece, and it's setting the story for what you want them to know. So if you're in human resources and you're wanting to go into communications, after you have your name and your address and your phone number, the next section you want to put communications professional or communications executive, because now you're telling me that's what you want to be, right? So now you want to show your expertise in the area of expertise. You want it to be related to the field you're going into. As you start to go down into your job title may be one thing, but if you've done something in that job that relates to the new area that you're trying to go into, that's what you want to put for that job. That job should now be tailored, and you should pull accomplishments out that relate to what you're going into. Is that helpful? Yes.
Okay, when we talk about online search firms like Monster or Career Builder, would you recommend using as many of them as possible, or would you target just a couple of them?
I would recommend you being very targeted with what the search firms that you're using. And we're going to talk about in a few minutes the different types of search firms and how those search firms will help you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So here, this gives you an idea. I'm going to skip over this pretty quickly. This gives you an idea, and we're on slide 9. And so you want to look at the fonts. Stick to the basic fonts. And I know some people might be in communications, they might be in social media, they might be in jobs that are looking for them to showcase some of the different graphic designs that they know how to do. However, the applicant tracking system does not sense that that's what you're trying to do, and it could actually make your resume work against you. I've had resumes I could not send to the hiring manager because the format changed once they uploaded it. Again, back to the point of the person who said they're trying to change careers. If you've been in your job 2, 3, 4 years, or maybe even a year, you've probably worked on different projects. You've worked on different assignments, and you've worked in teams. If the job you're looking for is starting to look at working in teams and working on different assignments or managing people, but your current job you don't actually manage people, talk about the projects you've worked on and how you've led in those projects. Because then it starts to get people to see you being able to lead people. You may not have led them overall from a performance review, but if you've led people and you've influenced people in projects, that actually is better than someone actually managing people, because now you know how to get things done without being the actual person over them. And that holds a lot of weight to be able to influence someone to get them to do something you want them to do. Any questions?
Could you wait for the mic, please?
That's a good question. The rule of thumb is most people go back 10 to 15 years. However, look at the job description and let the job description be your guide. If the job description is saying they're looking for someone to have 20 plus years, then now you want to showcase that. If their job description is looking at 10 plus years, you want to showcase that. The caveat is, though, if you've been at McGraw-Hill for 25 years, it really doesn't matter. Because however long you've been there, you're going to put the date you started through present. So you want to really look at the job description and focus on where you're wanting to go, because 9 times out of 10, no matter what you put on the job description, a recruiter can tell how long you've been in the workforce. I've had jobs that they said they only went back 15 years, and their very first job they were a vice president leading a whole company. So somewhere they had to start somewhere else. I don't think they graduated from, they could have graduated from college and started out as the vice president leading a Fortune 500 company, but I doubt it. So we can tell. So the biggest thing you want to focus on is not in the back of your head the age, but you want to focus on looking at the job description and using that job description to help you manage your resume. Tip is if the job description says, I'm looking for someone 5 to 7 years of experience, and you have 20 years, that's probably an indicator that shouldn't be on your A list, because you're probably going to be overqualified. Now, someone will say, I'm going to hold those questions to the end if you don't mind. So someone will say on that job description, well, I can do that. Of course I can do that. I have more than 7 years of experience. I have 25 years of experience. But in many cases, the hiring manager will look at that resume, and they're looking for someone that they want to make sure will not be bored in that particular job. They want to make sure that they're finding someone who's going to see that particular job as a robust opportunity for them. Yes, question?
Just a quick question on years of experience. If you happen to have...
I'm sorry, can you wait for the mic because our viewers can't hear you? Thank you.
Yes, sorry. I was just wondering if you have gone back, for instance, to graduate school for a time, can you include that in years of experience, or how do you think about that?
Good question. If you have a break in your resume, when you go down and I look at that you're in school and you put the number of years you were in school, I can see that that's where you were in your break. And many times you'll have an internship or something like that. If you're doing an internship, make sure you put in internship, so I don't think it's just a part-time job, but I know it's really a part of your education and development. Any other questions? Yes?
How many pages would you suggest on a resume?
I would suggest the best practice is 2 pages. If you can do it in 1 page, I'm sorry. She has to ask the question again. Okay.
How many pages would you suggest a resume should be?
I would suggest best practices, keep it to about 2 pages. Depending on your years of experience and if you're showing progression in your career, you could go to 3 pages, but usually 2 pages is the best practice and rule of thumb. And if you can do it in 1 page, that's great too.
What if you've had 2 or 3 positions at the same company? How much space do you give them on your resume?
Good idea. That's a good question. Thank you for asking. If you've been at a company for a while, you're going to use the first line to put the McGraw-Hill companies, 1999 to present. And then you're going to list each position as if it was a different company. But you don't, if you put the top heading as the main company, and then go down and list each position and have bullets under each position, then that's how you want to do it. Then you want to put the time frame next to the job, and you want to space not quite as far over as you have the main heading of how long you've been at the company, but then you want to put how long you've been at the company for each position. And it actually is great because that shows progression. What a mistake a lot of people will make is they'll put each job and they'll list the company again and again, and sometimes it throws the recruiter off, and we don't know if you left the company or came back, and especially if the company has different divisions with different names, it may look like you went to a different company if I'm not familiar with your industry. So someone could work at Platts, McGraw-Hill Corporate, and S&P, and if they put them in order of how they worked, I may think they went to 3 different companies every year. In reality, if you list the main company and then list the division and you list your accomplishments, now I can see, wow, this person progressed through the company. They now have a lot of knowledge in the company. The other thing is key, if you have time and you have room, is right underneath your company, put one little sentence in a smaller font of who that company is. So you don't want people to assume that they know your company. Everybody knows McGraw-Hill Education. Everybody knows S&P, but maybe they do and maybe they don't. I still have people who will tell me they'd like help finding a job in S&P, and I say, oh, I can help with that. They have no idea S&P is a part of McGraw-Hill. Some people don't know Platts is a part of McGraw-Hill. They don't know McGraw-Hill Education is a part of McGraw-Hill. That'll be true after a while. But you want to put, so what I've done is I might put McGraw-Hill companies, and underneath I will have a financial services, education, and media content provider for X amount of employees, and I may put the number of dollars of revenue that company has. So what that does is it sets the stage. A, you know how to work for a large company. You understand the politics around that company. You understand a lot of different things, and you know that industry. Is that helpful? Job search. So you know yourself. You got your resume together, got your cover letter, and you know you're going to customize the resume and customize the cover letter for every job. So a tip that I would tell you that will be helpful to you is for every job that you apply to, type your name, save your resume as your full name and the company that you're sending that resume to. Or if you're applying to more than one job within the company, put your full name, and you might put the requisition number of that job you're applying to. How does that help you? Let's say you've applied to 3 jobs in the company. In each of those jobs, you customize your resume to fit that job and that position. Well, when the recruiter calls you, you want to make sure you're talking on the same version that they're looking at. So if you move some bullets around because what was important to them, you have your first 3 bullets that's the most important to that job at the top. You want to make sure that when you start to talk about your resume and when the recruiter refers to the resume, you're referring to the same version. Does that make sense? So that can be helpful. Also, what that does is when your resume starts to get circulated around from person to person, the first thing they see in the subject when you open up the email is your name. So again, it's branding yourself. It's keeping your name in front of the person that's taken the resume. So job search. You have all the components of the job search, of the job. Now you're ready to search. In searching for a job, whether it's internal or external, you're going to have emotional highs and you're going to have emotional lows. And to help you track and keep track and not let that overwhelm you is to have a strategy, is to have a log. So raise your hand on how many people who've worked on projects. If you worked on a project, have you worked on created a project plan? Raise your hand if you had a project plan. And where you talk about milestones and you talk about deliverables and deadlines, right? So when you look at that plan, especially if it's something extra you're doing in your job, that helps you to stay focused and on target when other things come up, right? So the same with your job search. So for people sitting here now, they may go and apply for one job within the company. They may apply for another job 3 weeks from now. They may apply for another job 2 months from now. So that means 3 months away, you've applied to 3 jobs. So what are your chances? So you want to have a search strategy so it helps you to track all the companies that you're targeting and all the positions that you're targeting and all the resumes and applications that you've completed. Number one, to make sure you follow up, and number two, to make sure that you're staying on track for those days that you come home and you're just tired or life happens, right? So then you can open that up and you can see where you are. So remember, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. I had someone to email me the other day. They had applied to 100 jobs. That means 100 cover letters, 100 resumes, and they had 10 interviews and an offer. So they said to me, that was so hard. I hope I never have to do that again. So do you think they had a targeted search? Probably not. So when I asked them, do you have an A list, B list, and a C list of all the jobs you applied? They said, no, we just applied to jobs that were open. We just went out and applied. So they spent a lot of time and effort just applying. But if you have a search strategy and you're really looking at what you want and you're really honing in on your skills, you'll know 100% of the time if you're applying for a job and that's on your A list. And your A list means you've met 90% or more of what they're looking for. Your B list might be 70, your C list might be 50. It's not necessarily mean that you don't keep your perspective broad, but now you can keep it focused. Does that make sense? So set goals and monitor them. To answer your question, the strategy, the techniques. There's 4 basic techniques. You can use a search firm. You can apply to jobs online, networking, and reaching out to the company. So when you're looking at search firms, there's 2 types of firms. There's contingency firms and there's retained firms. Contingency firms, what that means is they're going to shop your resume to as many people as they can, because if someone happens to hire you, then they get paid. A retained search firm usually is at the more executive and senior level, and they get paid a certain amount of money up front. And then they get paid the difference based on the total compensation when the person is hired. But I will tell you, the recruiter at the search firms, they are there to find the best candidate for the firm. And if you're not the best candidate, and if you're not marketing your resume, and if you don't have the right resume and it's tailored to that particular job they're marketing for you, they're going to go to the next person and they're going to find the person who does. So I tell people when a search firm calls you, have a conversation with them, because your goal at that point is to build the relationship with them, not necessarily to go after that particular job. It's a conversation. It's all about relationships, because they may not have a job today that you're looking for, but they may have a job tomorrow. And every time you have an opportunity to talk to them, guess what? They learn something about you, and you learn something about them. Networking, traditional and social media. Who has a LinkedIn profile? If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, it's going to be harder for you to find a job. 89% of the companies now are using LinkedIn as their #1 place to source for that job. It's the #1 place they're going to actually post the job. Not Monster and not Career Builder. We have some companies who are not even going to Monster and Career Builder anymore, because LinkedIn is the place to go. Why is LinkedIn the favorite place? There's a couple of reasons. Number one, LinkedIn, I can go out and I can see a lot of things about you. I can see your interests. I can see what books you're reading. I can see if you're active, if you're posting information, if you're having a dialogue about your expertise. I can see all of your interests, all of your jobs. LinkedIn, whereas a resume is 2 pages or it's 3 pages. So that's it. That's done. It's a stagnant document. If I go to Monster, if you've ever uploaded your resume to Monster, do you go back to Monster every week and re-upload your resume? No. But LinkedIn, you have a tendency to continue to keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. And it's key that you do have it 100% up to date. We found out that about 90% of all hiring managers and recruiters found that they have been passing over candidates because they have an incomplete profile. You don't want that to be you. Angela and I can tell you, we can search for people, and there's over 14 million people on LinkedIn, and I still have a hard time finding 5 people that just have the basics that really have what their skill sets are, really their accomplishments. Reaching out to the company directly, great. But when you're reaching out to the company and you want to send a letter to John Beresford, it's better if John Beresford really knows who you are. And so what happens is a lot of time we will send a letter to the C-level people in the company thinking that's going to get you a leg up. You want to send a letter and you want to build the relationships with the recruiters because they're the people that have access to all the resumes. But if you decide to reach out to the company directly and you have a relationship with a particular individual in a company, make sure you have your pitch, your 2-minute pitch. What are you going to talk to them about? What are you going to tell them? Because if you don't have down what you want to tell them and you call them, how many people have gotten emails, raise your hand, have gotten emails or phone calls from friends? These are people you know, and their email says, my son, my daughter, my friend, or I am looking for a job. Can you help me? Yeah. And you have, yeah, Pam. You get a lot of those, right, Pam? And you're like, help them do what? You open up the resume, but you don't know what they want. Even if they want a job in communications or HR, we have so many different areas and functions in HR. So have your 2-minute pitch so people know exactly what you're looking for, and they can help you get that. These are the top job search sites and websites that you will use. You can go to Career Builder and Monster. They're great for, they have a career advice center where you can go and find example resumes, example cover letters. You can see trends, salary, all sorts of information. Craigslist, it's not just for buying lawnmowers anymore. You can actually see people post their jobs there. Craigslist is the one place I will tell you to make sure that when you are uploading your resume to someone, that you're uploading it to a legitimate company. If you happen to see that it's send your resume to somebody at yahoo.com, you just want to be mindful that you're really sending it to a legitimate place. And it's not to say that a small company may not use just a regular email address. They may not be able to afford to have the big applicant tracking systems. But just do your research and be mindful when you're using sites and uploading your resume, because you want to make sure it's going to a legitimate place. Anybody heard of Glassdoor? Glassdoor has been around about a year, maybe 2 years. And that's where you can go and get a wealth of information, or, should I say, opinions. This is where people have opinions of different companies that give you a sense and an idea of maybe the culture, of their interviewing experience, what they liked about the company, what they didn't like about the company. It's a wealth of information to go and find out what average salaries are for particular jobs, and you'll see how people rate the company and think of their culture and values. LinkedIn, we've talked about then. Indeed and Simply Hire. How many people have gone to Indeed and Simply Hired to look for a job? It's a great tool. It's an aggregator. What Indeed and Simply Hired does for you, it makes your life looking for a position a lot easier. You can go to those two particular sites and you can just about find all the open positions that are in every company. So what they do is every evening they go out and they scrape all the company sites and they'll put those positions on those sites. It's interesting because you might find the same position listed 2 or 3 times. You might see where that company has listed the position at Monster. They've listed, you see it from their website. So you'll see all the jobs there, and most of the time you can click on the job and it'll either send you back to the company to apply for the job or it'll send you to a location to apply for the job. So it's a great place. Indeed now has a way you can upload your resume so people can sort your resume at Indeed. So if you haven't gone to Indeed or Simply Hired, that's a great tool for you to use in your search. Depending on where you are, this may fit some of your specialty needs. So this is another place that you can go to find a job and look for different positions. The interview. Yes, question. We have someone with a question.
So just going back to the job search, I know you said LinkedIn is really 89%, I believe you said, of employers are really looking there. So do you recommend do you say it's a waste of time, for lack of a better word, to even go through all these different searches, or just really focus on LinkedIn or maybe even using the Indeed or Simply Hired if it brings in all the information from the other sites?
That's a very good question. I would say from you as the candidate, the more places that you can add your resume, the better. Because there may be that one particular company that's using Monster, that may be that one particular company that's using Career Builder. However, as you start to look at your strategy, I would say that your number one place that you want to make sure your information is updated is LinkedIn. You want to make sure you have a profile on LinkedIn. And there's a class that we do talking about social media, and we go through the steps of how you can really maximize your LinkedIn profile to get yourself noticed even on LinkedIn. There's a section called Answers where you can show you're an expert on LinkedIn. So, but LinkedIn is, I would say, your first priority. But to answer your question, it doesn't hurt to have your resume cast in other locations. Any other questions?
Can you tell me how important are recommendations on LinkedIn?
Great. And recommendations on LinkedIn are very important because it's a quick way for someone, a recruiter looking at your profile, to be able to see your work and to be able to see what people are saying about you. Fabulous. It's a hit. It's a home run because people can go there and see, oh, this is what they've done in this company. This is what people think about them in this company. It's already giving you references without you having to seek them. Any other questions on LinkedIn? Okay. So the interview. I can't tell you enough. Practice, 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 and be prepared, be prepared. Back to that 2-minute pitch. That 2-minute pitch is very important because it's going to set the stage for, number one, for you to be comfortable and for you to be confident and for you to be able to showcase your expertise. It will help you when you go into the room that even if the interviewer is not a skilled interviewer, you will be able to then articulate how you can benefit that company if you have your 2-minute pitch. Your 2-minute pitch is your segue to being able to help draw in the hiring manager and the recruiter, how they can see you in that particular role. And the other thing I like to tell people is when you're in an interview and you're preparing for the interview, think of it as a discussion. Some people have said to me, I've had people to call me for an interview, but I didn't want the job. They didn't offer you a job. They offered you a conversation. So the conversation does a couple of things. It gives you practice on your interviewing. You can walk away and go, oh, I should have answered the question this way, or I need to better prepare for this. Number two, it helps you to learn about different cultures. And it helps you learn about different industries and different companies. So you can go back to what you were looking for in your next role. Because a lot of people look at the interview as they're going to offer me a job. That's not necessarily the case. Yeah, you'd like for them at some point to get to the job, to get to the offer. But right now, you're just having a conversation. You're building a relationship. I know a particular person in this company who's an expert at helping people match people with jobs. So someone has called her, and at this particular time, she did not have an opening. This is an executive here in the company, wonderful person. She didn't have an opening. Someone said, I'd like for you to have a conversation, right? That was 3 months ago. They're now interviewing for the job. In the meantime, this particular person is very well connected in that particular space. They referred this person to 3 other senior executives who got them into 3 other companies for jobs that were open. So do you see how it was a conversation? And because this person had a great connection with that person started referring them to other people without them asking. So if a headhunter or a recruiter calls you, it's a conversation. Now, you can be honest with them if that's not necessarily a position you're looking for. You don't want to lead anyone on either. But it could be an exploratory. You might say, you know, this may not be the role for me, but I definitely would like to talk to you about my skill set and how what I've done might be a fit in your company. See how you change that? Then it now lets the person make the decision to continue having a conversation. So you didn't close the door, but you were very honest about what you were looking for at the same time. Because I've actually had people who said, okay, but I still like to talk to them because I like their resume. You see, because now the recruiter is thinking, I can bring them in, they'll see our culture, they'll see how much they like it. But you were all upfront and very honest. Does that make sense? So I always tell people, again, think about it as a conversation, think about it as a discussion, and think about it from the standpoint, we as the recruiter, if we've called you and you've made it through the phone interview, we have our fingers crossed, our hands crossed, our toes crossed. We want you to be fabulous. So we're in the background wanting you to be fabulous. We want you to like us as much as we want to like you. So you really have the control in the interview. You just don't know it. Because trust me, when you walk in the interview with the hiring manager, I'm saying, oh, don't ask the wrong questions because we want them to like you. You know, we want that chemistry to work. So what you really have the control and don't know it. But when you walk in, we want to learn about you. We're looking for 4 things: cultural fit, chemistry, compensation, competencies. 9 times out of 10, if you've gotten through the interview by phone, you've probably got the competencies and compensation in range. So now, a big part of the conversation when you come in to talk about people is to expound upon your competencies and skills, but really to talk about cultural fit and chemistry. So what kind of feedback do I get from hiring managers after I've brought in 5 or 6 candidates? You know, Emily, I don't think they'll work well in this culture. They really didn't seem passionate about the job. They really didn't seem like they would be able to be committed to this job. See, they didn't say anything about skills. Emily, they were very quiet. They didn't ask me any questions. They didn't seem to be engaging. You see, their whole conversation back to me is about, and please don't share this with any of the hiring managers. This is a secret between us in the room and on the phone, right? We don't want any of them to know. But they're not talking to me about, 80% of the time, it's not their skills. It's about the connection. So here's a tip. One of the things that was told to me earlier in my career was, if you are an introvert, which I am not, but if I was an introvert, that means you're not a lively, bubbly person automatic, right? But if you walk into that interview, you need to be aware of your personality, and you need to be aware of who you are. So if the hiring manager's bubbly, you need to be a little bit more bubbly. The hiring manager's very engaged, you need to be a little bit more engaged. That makes sense? Because it's all about the chemistry. I've been in panel interviews, and the candidate walked in, and they were not the best. They had the minimum qualifications, but now you have 4 top candidates, and they actually were not the best of the 4. But guess who got the job? They did. That person walked in, and they flexed their personality for every single person in that room. And when they walked out, the person, I like her. She's great. I said, okay, wait a minute. What about their technical skills? Oh, yeah, we'll help them. They got that. But she was engaging, and I could see her being on my team. Do you see the difference? So as you're starting to interview, think about your personality and how you can see yourself as a fit in that culture, and how you can see yourself having chemistry with the person in front of you, because that'll help and go a long way. Any questions? You control your performance. You control. So practice and be prepared. So one tip, have you ever had someone to call you, let's say a friend or another colleague, and the first question you ask them, how are you doing? And they say, I'm fine. And you say, you're not fine, right? No, I am really. No, you're not. So what did you hear over the phone? Their tone, their lack of enthusiasm, their lack of passion, right? If you're interviewing, we can hear the same thing. So you want to make sure that when you're in the interview, whether it's over the phone or whether it's in person, that not only what you're saying is projecting enthusiasm, but your personality and your body language is projecting the same thing. That make sense? Positive attitude. Be confident. Be an expert. If you're sitting in the interview and you're having a face-to-face conversation, we obviously think that you have something we're looking for. So now you have the control. Just reel us in. Just like a date. You know, when you go on a date, you're like, this is what I'm going to do. Same thing. It's a date. So now you're in control. You're just going to continue your elevator pitch. You're going to continue telling us how you can see us in that company. You're just going to keep reinforcing it. Make sense? Any questions? Body language, dress for success. I tell people anxiety can kick in before you know it, especially the morning of the interview. That's when it rains, the traffic is bad, the trains aren't working, everything's going wrong. Electricity went out the night before. So be prepared. Whatever you're wearing, get it out the night before. Have it ironed, have it ready. So you'll now be ready for anything that might happen. That makes sense? I've even gone to the interview 2 or 3 days before, and I've timed myself on the train. I've timed my walk. I've timed driving to that location, and then I've added some time. So when you have gone through all those things, now you're more relaxed. You're more confident. You'll be very surprised how more confident you will be when you don't have any of the unknowns creeping up on you. This helpful to everybody? This make sense? Research the company. You have LinkedIn, and all the hiring managers know you have LinkedIn. So we were going to expect that you have researched the company. Research all the individuals, if they're on LinkedIn, that you're going to meet with. Learn something about them. Learn where their past is. You may not know it, but you might have went to the same school. You might have worked at the same company that they used to work for. They might have had the same career they had before. Learn their career path. Because a lot of times when you walk in the room, the first thing the hiring manager or recruiter will do is try to break the ice. So now you can help them break that ice. When they start to say, oh, yeah, I noticed you. I saw on your LinkedIn. I did the research. People like it when they know you've researched them. They like it when they know you've put time and effort into finding out more about that company. Questions asked by the interviewer. Don't you just love that very first one? Tell me about yourself. Is that not your favorite question? Raise your hand if that's your favorite question. Okay, I got 2 people out of 60 people, 50 people in the room that raise their hand. That should be your favorite question. Do you know why? Because they gave you an open book to tell them whatever you want them to know. You get to pick and choose how you're going to answer that question. And because you've done research on the company, and you've looked at press releases, you've looked at their investor relations page, you've looked at the people you're interviewing with, now you have information. You've taken the job description and you've studied it. You might have actually contacted people in the company and just asked them for information about the company through LinkedIn. So now you have information. So when they start to talk about, tell me about yourself, what are you going to use? Your 2 minutes pitch. You're going to talk about your experience, you're going to talk about the skills, you're going to talk about your accomplishments, and you're going to say, and this is how I can help you. You end it with, this is how I'll be able to come to your company and provide those same expertise and do da-da-da-da-da. So that should be your favorite question, because now you control how that is. Your biggest accomplishment. What time is it? Okay, I've got a couple of minutes. Your biggest accomplishment. Pick something that relates to the job. Pick something from the job description that you can match your accomplishment to, so they can, again, see you visibly in that role. See you visibly tackling whatever their problems are. Tell me a time when. Those are behavior interview questions. I would tell everyone, if you're not familiar with behavior interview questions or the STAR format, go out and Google tonight STAR and behavioral interview questions, and you'll see a host of information about how to tackle and create questions around tell me a time when or give me an example when. You'll then be able to have clues on when they've switched styles of interviewing, so you'll know how to switch your switch your 2-minute pitch to fit that answer. Because if you come up back with Know Yourself and you have about 4 stories, those stories will answer any question that they throw at you. Any question. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a couple other sessions that you might hear about. Questions you should ask. What I tell people here, when you look at tell me why this position is open, you want to know the answer. But the reason these questions are important to you is because these questions allow you to fill in any gaps that the hiring manager may not have asked you about during the interview. So it continues to help you hone into why you might be able to be a fit for that job. It will also give you clues to maybe you need to expound upon something different so that he may have now shared with you a reason he may not be hiring you. So he's giving you a clue. So when he says, what does success look like for this position? And he says, well, I see a person who looks like this, and they do this, and they've accomplished this. You say, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did this at McGraw-Hill, at S&P, and I can do this at Platts. And you can tell them how what you've done in that division will work in their division. Does that make sense? So all these questions are really, yes, you do want to know the answer, but it helps you then to, oh, I didn't talk about that. Now you can expound upon one more area that makes you a home run for that job. So use all of your resources. Use your LinkedIn, build your networks, talk to people. And when you reach out to people on LinkedIn, one of the things you don't want to do is ask them for the job. You want to reach out to people on LinkedIn and you want to get more information. You want to get more information on the company, the culture. Once you start talking to them, trust me, they'll start telling you what they'll help you do. You won't have to ask them. And you keep from putting them on the spot as well. It makes them a lot more comfortable if you're calling them or setting up a meeting to learn about the culture, about how they got where they are in their career, because people like to talk about themselves. But as they're talking about themselves and you're giving that 2-minute pitch, you now make a connection. They also become a person who might send an email on your behalf to say, you need to meet this person. They would be a great fit for this company. See how that worked? You didn't ask them to do it, they volunteered. Any other questions? I open up the questions to Buzz, as well as in the room, as well as on the phone.
What if you worked for a company that has since been acquired? How do you reference them on your resume? As the old company name that you knew or the current company?
I would put the current company and in parentheses formerly the old company. Because sometimes the old company, depending on their brand, they'll be more known potentially than the new company. Any other questions?
Can you give us an example of a well-spoken elevator speech?
That's putting me on the spot, yes. So I'll give you 2 examples, and you tell me which one you like best. Hi, I'm Emily Nichols-Mitchell, and I have been in talent acquisition for about 15 years. And I've looked at a lot of resumes, and I think that if you hired me at your company, I would be able to come in and help with reducing your time to fill, and I would help the recruiters learn social media. Okay, that's one, right? Second, I'm Emily Nichols-Mitchell, and I have been in the human resources and communications field for about 20 years. During the course of that time, I have accomplished by going into companies and doing change management. I've helped companies such as yourself retool, restructure, and build great talent acquisition teams. For an example, I have helped a team at my last company go from 100 days time to fill down to 45 days time to fill. As a result, this helped client satisfaction, the candidate experience, as well as it also helped you to be up to productivity. Who do you want to hire? Is that good? Yes. You guys put me on the spot. That's not fair. Thank you. Thank you.
My question is that I'm an intern currently at McGraw-Hill, and I'll be graduating next year. So what is the right time to apply for a full-time job?
That's a good question. And you're graduating when?
May 2013.
May 2013?
Yes.
I would probably say, depending on the field you're going into, you want to now start building relationships and having conversations. So you want to start getting your name out into different companies so that when there's a job open, your resume is on top. Because there are companies who are looking for people who are just graduating, because that means you're up to date on all the trends in the field. So now you want to look at not so much looking for a job, but you want to look to building relationships and learning more information about those targeted companies. And your resume will rise to the top. Any other questions?
Is it true that you should not put your entire resume on LinkedIn?
Is that true? I would say you want to put information on LinkedIn that is going to relate to the brand you're trying to build for yourself. Whatever you do put on your on LinkedIn, if you're copying and pasting it from your resume to LinkedIn, you want to make sure that if they have their your resume in front of you, and you're saying, I reduced time to fill from 105 days to 45 days, that my resume doesn't say something else. Because now, which one do you believe?
And we have another question from one of our viewers. If you're in an admin position but you want to change careers and move to another field, how would you do that? Or how would you structure your resume to reflect?
You want to look at your skill set that you have in your current role and how that skill set will transfer into your new role. And you want to look at each position that you've had, you want to add those accomplishments into your role that will fit the new role you're going into, so that you're constantly highlighting and branding yourself.
We actually have a lot of questions going on online, and we were wondering if you would be willing to answer them on Buzz if people continue the discussion after this presentation, if you would address.
I will. That's a good idea. Thank you. I think I have time, though, to take 2 or 3 more questions.
We have one more. If you don't have a degree, but the job requires you to have one, will the recruiters still consider you for this position, or are you pretty much out of the running?
That's a good question. That's also a clue of what the person is looking for, and it really does depend on the company. But if the first item on the required field says you have to have a degree, that's what that means. You have to have a degree. Many cases doesn't necessarily say don't apply, but when I talked about the A list, B list, and C list, now set expectations for if you think they're going to call you back, because there are some companies that are very adamant. If I'm looking for someone who has a degree, I'm looking for someone who has a degree. That's their cutoff. You also find in some cases where they'll say degree preferred. Now they've opened it up that they'll include both. The second thing is they might say degree or equivalent years of experience. Now they've opened it up to both. So I tell people who don't have a degree but they have 20 years of experience in that particular field, that's where you network. That's where you start to get to know people in the company so they can be brand ambassadors on your behalf. Where there's a will, there's a way. Another question? I have a question in the front of the room. And then a question in the back of the room.
Hi, I'm an intern also. When applying, I'll be applying for, I guess, my first job position next year. And when they say suggested salary as a student coming out of college, what do you suggest?
I would probably do your homework on salaries, what type of salary should be for that field. However, you want to talk about your negotiable. So any way that you can talk about how you're negotiable, you can say that. If you're going for a position and you know from your research that the average person is making $50,000 and you say you're 25, that may have a sign that you don't know your value. That makes sense?
Going back to something you had previously just touched on and to another intern question, I'm also going to graduate pretty soon, and you said start building relationships and having conversations now with companies. How would you go about doing that, since it's going to be a year or two since I graduate? How do I start building those relationships if they think it might be just a waste of time since it's so early?
That's a good question. I'm going to actually have a session on using social media to build your relationships, so we can go into a little bit more detail about that. So if you talk to Pam Coles, she can work with you. I think she had to leave, but she can work with you on setting up something that maybe I can come and have a more in-depth conversation. But to answer your question, LinkedIn is a great way to start building those relationships. There's another way. Remember when I said answers? If you go to LinkedIn and at the top bar and you scroll all the way over, there will say jobs, groups, and it says more. If you click on more, there's a tab that says answers. If you go into answers, there's a place where you can ask questions and there's a place where you can answer questions. And as you start to answer questions, that's a touch point. That's a way that you can start to show your expertise. And that's a way, as a new grad, you can start to show the trends and how you've kept up on trends. At that point in time, people will start to see that as they start to search your name. if you, as another tip for LinkedIn, make sure you have a URL. When you go out and Google your name, if your LinkedIn profile doesn't come up at the top, it's probably because you don't have your own personal URL. But those are different ways that you can reach out to companies now. When you reach out to companies, whether you're a new grad or a seasoned professional, if you're not asking for a job and you're just asking to learn more about the company, people are so willing to talk to you about a company. And when they look at your profile and they see that you are going to be a new grad, they'll reach out to you and they'll love to build that network. They love building networks with new grads because you're the future of those companies. That makes sense? Any other questions? If not,
Operator?
Yes, we do have a question over the phone line. Simone Catacomb, your line is open.
Hi, Emily. I have a question with regard to breaking your resume based on starting a family, say a year or two. Does that negatively impact you from a recruiter's perspective? And if asked, how would you feel that question on an interview?
that doesn't necessarily negative impact you at all. If you take a break, can you still hear me?
Yes,
Okay. So if you're taking a break because of family reasons, you don't necessarily have to put that on your resume. You can actually talk about in your cover letter how you've kept up on trends. So now it deflects from that gap, and we're not focused on the gap, but we're focusing all the things that you can do to help us solve whatever problem we're solving. The other thing you can do when you get into the interview and someone starts to talk about that gap, you can say, I took time off for family or personal reasons, but during that time, you now bridge back to how you've kept up on trends, how you've kept up on being a member of organizations, how you might have volunteered your services that used your expertise. So you continue to focus on how you can brand yourself to continue to show that hiring manager how they can see you in that role. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Just a reminder to ask a question over the phone, please press *1.
So I have time for one more question. Okay. If not, was this helpful to everybody? Yes. And if we decide to have more sessions on how to use LinkedIn, how to maximize LinkedIn, how to get to know yourself better, would you guys like to see that? Is that an interest you'd have here in the room? Okay. So how can we, do we want to maybe,
we'll send an email.
We'll send an email.
For the email box to get more information on who will be interested.
And I will also be sending out a survey, so if you'd be so kind to complete that survey, and at the bottom it has written text, and if you would like to have more sessions, just say you'd like to have more sessions on knowing yourself, job search, because it's difficult to go into the deep dive of it here, and it's really to give you a sense to help you from an overview, but we'll go deep and answer all your nitty-gritty questions in each of those sessions. Is that helpful? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily.
And anyone who has any more questions online, please feel free to email me or send them through Buzz. Okay, thank you.